Dr. Humenston has a wealth of experience doing just that. Dr. Humenston was appointed Vice President of University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources in 2015. She served in the Clinton administration as Deputy Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at USDA from 1998 until 2001. In 2009, she was appointed by President Obama to serve as the California State Director for USDA Rural Development. Dr. Humenston produced a widely acclaimed guidebook on access to capital and led efforts to bring rural issues to the forefront throughout California. Please give Dr. Humenston a warm Farmers Union welcome.
Thank you. It's really a thrill to be here, even though it is my home state, so let me offer a welcome to you. I realize some of you might have been actually hoping for slightly different weather than we're offering, but we're really happy to see this moisture, so I'm not going to complain about it. You'll all just have to put up with it. And I hope you weren't planning to visit the Sierra, because I really don't recommend that right now. I was just seeing on the news reports this morning all the accidents and all the people going up there that don't know how to put snow chains on. But one way or another, we'll get through this. I'm really thrilled to be here this morning and asked to share some thoughts with you on this idea of seeking the triple bottom line. I'm going to refer to that a lot as we go through this morning because I'm really trying to offer up some solutions to many of the challenges we've been facing for a long, long time. Like you, I'm very concerned about the consolidation in our farm and food systems, in the supply chains that all too often aren't working. And it's great to have the advocacy efforts out there to try to fix some of those problems. But the reality is, if we're going to say they're not working, what are we replacing them with? And that's where I've really tried to place a lot of my time. So let me jump right into it. You heard in my introduction that I had the privilege of serving President Obama for several years as State Director of Rural Development here. And in that time, I got to really expand my thinking and my awareness of some of the opportunities that were out there. As you may recall, there was this little thing in 2008 that we called the Great Recession, nasty little thing, from which most of rural America has never fully recovered. A lot of the solutions, a lot of the investments to pull us out of that nationally didn't always serve rural America as well as they could. And that's true here in California as well as any other state. One of the things that was really frustrating nationally was in December 2009 when President Obama held a White House meeting on jobs and economic development. I don't think the word rural was even mentioned once. But to give him credit, he quickly realized that oversight and then asked then Secretary Tom Vilsack, our current secretary as well, to please do something about that. And I know there's at least one or two of my colleagues who were state directors. There you are, Tony, from Ohio. You will recall a few weeks before Christmas, Secretary Vilsack asked us to please hold these jobs and economic development forums. And they wanted them within a few weeks. And we're like, Christmas, that's not gonna work. Give us at least till the end of January. And I did a really crazy thing here in California. Most states went out and they had one forum in their capital, pulled in the usual players, and got some great advice on what to do, but it was a lot of, conventional wisdom. I wanted to see if there was any other wisdom out there. And I love working the grassroots, I always have. So I got a crazy idea to try to hold a forum in every single one of our 58 counties in the month of January. And we did, we came close. We ended up with 43, partially because I didn't try to organize them myself. I identified different partners in each county and I said, hey, will you organize this forum? Our staff will provide you staff support. We don't care if you get 5 people there or 50 or 100, just have people come in and talk to them about what are their needs. What are their needs around jobs and infrastructure and finance and et cetera. And that's that report you see there that we ended up publishing, 70-some pages. Tony, I don't know, I think most of my colleagues turned in 3 to 5 pages. And I got a lot of grief for being insane, but we're still using that document because it is very, very comprehensive. And unfortunately, too many of those issues have not gone away. One of the big issues that was brought up was access to capital. So I pulled together a team of over 100 people, from big bankers down to little bankers to economic development to everything in between, and we developed this guidebook. We started off thinking we were going to develop policy. We were going to develop policy, find those roadblocks for access to capital and recommend how to fix it. And what we discovered was there actually was a fair amount of capital out there, but people didn't know about it, and they didn't know how to access it. And there was just little tiny roadblocks some of those had that were easier to fix than going after the big stuff. So this guidebook is actually also still in wide use around the state. I use it all the time now in the work we do. Now, doing all of that with rural development was really exciting. But just about 7 years ago, an opportunity came up to take it to a whole new level. Because as I was working with NRCS during the Clinton administration and rural development and every project in between, I've been in the private sector too, I always needed cooperative extension at the table. And all too often, they weren't there. And it was frustrating. And so I thought when the job opened up to take it on, I had a lot of people around the state tell me it was time to put my money where my mouth was and see what I could do with it. So this is more or less what I have now, and not dissimilar from what I found several years ago, as far as cooperative extension. I'm the director of it in this state in my current job. I'm also the director of the Ag Experiment Station. And I'm fortunate here in California because our cooperative extension is very different than many states. We have not only the scientists on our land-grant university campuses doing that research and getting it out in the field, but we have full academic scientists located in our county offices doing research hand in glove with local communities and farmers and natural resource managers. And then we've got these 13 statewide programs. And one of the things I'm trying to do there is really find where there's synergies between them, how we can really leverage them and eke out even more than they themselves individually are. And because of that, we're getting more and more volunteers. You know, we've always had our 4-H and our Master Gardeners. One of our fastest growing programs right now is our California Naturalist, because we're finding it is a program where we're doing workforce training for horticulture, landscaping companies. We're now working closely with Forest Service and CAL FIRE on helping people make their homes more fire resistant. And we just got a contract with our State Department of Parks and Rec to train all their employees. Cooperative extension, we're doing that. That's actually something we're trying to do here in the state, is get our state agencies, our county governments, our NGOs, some of our organizations to understand they don't necessarily need to build their own science unit, their own research unit. They can partner with us and probably get way more bang for the buck. Because my cooperative extension folks can reach back into our entire university system and go find that expert or that little bit. And plus, by working together, we're able to bring in some of the large grant dollars to get the job done. So I give you all of that as background for what I want to really talk about today, is some of that triple bottom line. So this is the mission statement I have, and I love it. Because quite frankly, I would defy you to name something I can't work on. As if those 3 bullet points that are pretty traditional aren't enough. You know, safe, nutritious food systems, healthy environments, natural resources, our youth development, 4-H, etc. That second bullet point, economic success in a global economy, that's what we're supposed to be delivering to all 40 million Californians. And arguably, we've done a fantastic job for over 100 years in delivering on that mission in agriculture. We have helped our farmers get the new crop varieties, improve their irrigation, improve their production practices. We've helped them with their economic success. Plenty more to do, no doubt about it, but we've been there, and we work closely with Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, Western Growers, our commodity groups, all these partners out there. But we haven't really done much beyond that until recently. And I'm of the firm opinion that for farmers to be successful, you got to be able to be farmers. You maybe don't need to wear 20 other hats. The marketer, the processor, the distributor. How can you be the world's best farmer if you're trying to do 20 jobs at once? And for your rural communities, if some of those jobs, those economic activities are in your community is going to thrive more. So that's part of what we've been trying to do. We've been really trying to build this economic ecosystem, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit more too in a second. But part of what we're doing is trying to find the synergies. I actually like that word. It's where you find where the sum is greater than the parts. And in this case, you're looking here at that red arrow, which is, a very standard farm food supply chain, right? Your inputs, your farming activities, your harvest, your process, you distribute. Very classic. But what's really exciting is when you start looking at all the other industry clusters that touch onto that particular supply line and where you can find opportunities there. And that's a lot of what we do. Sometimes these industry clusters are investing. Sometimes they're partnering to create manufacturing or processing facilities. Sometimes they're doing campaigns with us around agro-tourism, or they're helping us with new technologies or whatever. And like renewable energy, there's so much opportunity for ag waste to actually be renewable energy, a huge project we've been working on. So we use this as kind of a way to show the opportunities there. And boy, do we need them. Do you remember March 2020? We all do, because we got shut down at home for a couple of years. But this is what happened in that 1 month. At the same time that our food service and drinking requirements were going down, our demand for food in the grocery stores themselves shot up 27% in 1 month. And guess what happened? Empty shelves in the grocery stores. At the same exact time, farmers were plowing under crops and dumping milk because our supply chains were not flexible enough and nimble enough to deal with the situation. It took a couple months to get working through that. And a lot of it was ridiculous. Perfectly good food that was aiming at the restaurant service couldn't go to the grocery store simply because it didn't have the right label on it. Really? Really? I mean, that's just ridiculous. And we're still trying to fix some of those issues. So what we're looking at now is really trying to find, how do we take this into a more comprehensive partnership? I talk with my hands. I'm going to move that over. Up here in the upper corner here, you see the very traditional things you think of cooperative extension and all of the partners we work with. New technologies, new crops, nutrition systems, dealing with climate change, etc. But what we're trying to do is really go down there and see where, again, those synergies, the collaborations are at around worker and community well-being. Doesn't help you to be the best farmer out there if your community is falling apart, if your schools are collapsing, if your kids don't have jobs. Same thing with overall industry recovery, resiliency, compliance issues that are just growing and growing, market competitiveness, all these issues we've got to deal with. And part of the way we're trying to deal with that now is really look at this economic ecosystem. I've mentioned that a couple times. I'll probably say it a couple more. This is a project we kicked off about 10 or 11 years ago here in California. It was when the White House was asking for proposals around their investing in manufacturing communities partnerships. We managed to get 3 different regions, 28 counties, to go together and put together a proposal around food and beverage manufacturing. We were looking to really build more opportunities for processing locally grown crops throughout this area. And the issues you see there on the side, workforce, new markets, infrastructure, supply chain, access to capital, research and innovation. We made sure we had folks from all of those elements of that overall economic ecosystem at the table when we were looking at food and beverages. Because what we found is when they were all talking to each other, we could get efficiencies. We could jointly do projects. We could get better investment. We can make projects go faster. The local elected and state elected officials loved seeing this, as did the economic development organizations. We pulled them in too. This is still a growing concern, and it's actually been the foundation of several other projects we're working on. Another key point related to that we've learned that I think is important, and I'm doing even more of, is the need to make sure we've got the collaboration happening between government, university, our academic, and industry partners. Making sure they're all at the table, they're all working. I've brought in several large grants recently because we had all three of this as part of the proposal. I don't just simply let my cooperative extension people submit proposals anymore. I'm like, okay, who's your partners? And it makes a huge difference. We've been bringing in some large grants because of that. We've also went out and built this network statewide. And by the way, that's several years of work. That did not happen overnight. But it also didn't happen with a lot of money either. I didn't have any money when I kicked that off. Our cooperative extension service here in California had been going through 20 years of budget cuts. We had shrunk to the point we had half the cooperative extension people out in the field that we had 20 years earlier. Half. And it was awful because the need was there. We didn't have the scientists or the people to do the research and the work. So I created a position of Chief Innovation Officer, and I had the right guy already on staff to do it. And I sent him out and I said, go to these regions around the state and seek out the coalition of the willing. Don't waste time on people that don't want to work with us. I love the coalition of the willing. You get much more done much faster. Bring them to the table and say, okay, what do we got here in this region? Who's here? Who's doing what? What's missing? How do we get it there? And form these regional activities. And we did. And then we started linking the regional activities up statewide. Now, all these folks, and you've got government and academia and private sector. These are just some of the initial partners, our key ones. We've got dozens more that don't have their logos on this side. And we got more all the time wanting to join. Because what they've seen now is we're getting things done. And we're putting together really successful proposals, not just for grants, but for business plans and private investing and big, huge, economic development initiatives. But it's not all about this kind of thing. It's sometimes the small stuff too. I'm a huge fan of what was done up at the county fairgrounds in Humboldt here in this state. It's something we're trying to replicate all over the state. The woman who was the CEO several years started looking around and saying, oh my God, most of these buildings on the fairgrounds are just like not used most of the year, or they're underutilized year round. What could we use them for? And she did one of the things that we desperately need in every single community, all of yours as well. She started a commercial kitchen. The demand for access to commercial kitchens is enormous for small individuals and businesses that are trying to be entrepreneurs in that farm and food sector. She set up a commercial kitchen, turned into a couple more. She offered space. She's now incubated over 15 businesses at the county fairgrounds. A couple of them had to leave because they got so big there wasn't enough room for them there. And they're now major businesses in that community. And there's going to be more. And we've got several other county fairgrounds looking at this model now. It's such a perfect win-win for county fairgrounds. It actually brings some income to them. And it gets people to the fairgrounds all the time, year-round. Similarly, we started reaching out and working more closely with some unlikely allies. The California State Economic Summit. I invited myself to be on the steering committee of the very first one. And the people that know me know that I'm not shy about doing such things. But I did that because it was the year we were doing that Access to Capital guidebook, and they were getting ready to have a state economics summit, and they were talking about regulation and infrastructure, and I forget what the other two issues were. Not a word about money and capital. How are you going to pay for this stuff? And I kept asking that. How are you going to pay for this? We've got to have access to capital. We've got to identify the investment and the money. Where's it coming from? And I kept saying it so long that they finally put me on the steering committee formally, because, I'd been sitting in all the meetings anyway. And they created a fifth new working group around access to capital. So I chaired that the very first summit back in, I think this was 2012 in San Jose. And it was great. I was so thrilled to do that. But then when I was actually at the summit for 3 days, I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm listening. Not a word about water, soil, ag, food, anything rural, not a word. And I'm like, I was shocked. I kind of assumed it'd be there. I was focused on capital at the time. And it just blew me away. So I started mouthing off again, and eventually the next summit, the second one, we had a working group on, what would you call it? Oh, working landscapes. The name has evolved over the years to where now it's productive and resilient landscapes, because people like that better. But it's the same thing. We're trying to really take advantage of what are the opportunities around our working landscapes in California. It's huge. And these were the 3 items we initially came up with in that work group. And I've been co-chairing that with our State Association of Rural County Supervisors. Perfect partnership, academia, government there. And again, we got a lot of private sector active. One of the products we created as part of that work group is this report, which I did in 2018, released it in 2019. In fact, I need to update it. It's been 5 years. And this thing has helped us politically with messaging on the need to invest in working landscapes like you wouldn't believe. What we did is we took that wheel that you sit there, every one of your states has it. It's the economic activity in your state. In our state, it's about $4 trillion. Oh, and you know why we did this? Here in California, the news media love to talk about how farming is less than 2% of the GDP. I cannot begin to tell you how much that annoys me. I usually use far worse language, profanity even. 2% of the GDP. Because what they do is they measure the raw farm gate. What's the value of that crop the day it's harvested? And that's the only thing they look at. They don't look at the stuff coming in. They don't look at the activities going on. They don't look at the processing. They don't look at any of the, value added. And they don't even take into account that, guess what? We all do like to eat a few times a day. I guess that's just not important. So we decided to do something about it. We took this wheel, and it is exactly like the normal wheel, but we went into each one of those slices and very thoughtfully eked out what could be directly attributed to working landscapes. In fact, if you go look at this report, we put the NAICS codes we used in the back. And we were very conservative because we knew people were going to fight us on this. For example, that little green line there, working landscapes, we couldn't separate out livestock from pets in veterinary services because they just don't in the NAICS codes. So we didn't use a penny of it. There's not 1 penny of veterinary services in that green slice. There's not a penny in that green slice of retail food sales because we couldn't attribute most of that directly to California. Now, wholesale and processing, that's in there, and a lot of other things too, but look at it. It's tied as the 5th or 6th largest segment of the state's economy. It comes in ahead of healthcare, real estate, retail, construction, et cetera, et cetera. It's tied with finance. This blew people away, which is why I'm going to update it, and I may start doing it more than just every 5 years, because this is really critically important. We've used this in so much messaging and political advocacy over the years. And it's been what has really helped us move forward a lot of partnerships. This is something we just did at the State Economic Summit a year and a half ago. I did a really crazy thing, and I say that because the traditional cooperative extension model doesn't always do stuff like this. But because of the messaging of that report I just showed you, and changing how our scientists report the impacts they deliver to people, we got a chunk of new money. I got enough money to take us back up to where we were 20 years ago. Over 100 new cooperative extension specialists and advisors, which we're hiring like crazy right now if you know any young people looking for a great job in cooperative extension. But I reserved 16 of those slots for myself, which I'm allowed to do legally, but culturally in academia, the boss doesn't do that. But, you know, I'm the boss, so I can do a few things. I reserved those slots to stand up a cohort of community and economic development. Because again, farmers can't be successful if the host system around them isn't functioning. You need broadband. You need regional food systems and supply chains and processing that's functioning. In California, we need bio-based products manufacturing. We got a problem with too much biomass, particularly in our forests, burning up all the time. You need things like ag tech. That number 11 spot there is a cooperative extension advisor who's solely working on ag tech for small farmers, who often get overlooked in the ag tech world, and so forth and so on, doing a lot of different stuff here. And what's really interesting, you know how in the past cooperative extensions always partnered with the farmers, the commodity groups, et cetera. That California Stewardship Network is the co-host of our State Economic Summit. It's a statewide umbrella of regional economic development organizations that have committed themselves to a triple bottom line. That's why I love them. I don't love traditional economic development, you know, where you spend a fortune wining and dining CEOs to move their manufacturing from your state to your state. And the only people winning in that scenario are the CEOs doing the wining and dining, and I guess the golf courses do well, probably the lawyers, but you aren't, and your communities aren't either. We're focusing here, people, planet, prosperity, triple bottom line. How do we grow new businesses? How do we help existing businesses expand? How do we find, again, those synergies? How do we make use of things like co-ops? Co-ops are such an underutilized tool, and they aren't just about farming. In fact, you're sitting in the city that has one of the most fascinating cooperatives in the entire world, I think. And pardon me if this gets a little blue for y'all, but if you noticed over in Columbus and Broadway, there's a lot of XXX rated places over there. It's just something that happens in any big city. One of those is a cooperative owned by the women that dance in it, the exotic dancers. They formed a cooperative. Just to give you an example of how you can potentially use cooperatives. You can get pretty creative with them. They're a powerful tool. We're trying to use them more and more. That stewardship network, though, those members are out there scattered around the state. Each of these numbers you see here is paired up with one of those members. Those members have said, when I get that cooperative extension advisor, I'm going to open up my contact list. I'm going to open doors. I'm going to help them bring in more money. We're going to help them hit the ground running. In fact, I just got a wonderful email this morning from the guy up in number 1 who, upon himself, and he's only been on the job 2 months, he's a little baby up there, he helped them do this huge project with the cultural arts where they're trying to get a new 1,000-seat performing arts center, and the guy that's working on it just was like raving about how much help that guy was. He's my agritourism guy. You know, so quickly, what a difference. And that's going to make a huge impact on that local economy. Oh, okay, there we go. This is an example of what can come from that kind of partnership building. You know, we had a lot of money being pumped into the economy this last couple of years. The Economic Development Administration out of Commerce had a big thing called Build Back Better. And we put in proposals. We were actually, Cooperative Extension, we were part of several proposals that were written in, and we did get some of those $1 million startup ones, but this was one of the big guys. We proposed $100 million for this Fresno Merced Future of Food initiative, and we got $65.1 million for these 3 activities that we very carefully designed to support regional food systems here. And this is size neutral. It's from very small, very much focused on underserved communities, up to big processors too, because we recognize the ecosystem needs all of them. And we've got to support all of them. But the small entrepreneurs, again, underserved communities, big effort here. That green wheel is mostly led by a couple of our universities, campuses. I'm not a campus. My organization is statewide. I have deans from the campuses reporting to me because California has all 10 UC campuses. It's land grant. So they created my office to be an umbrella over the whole system as we try to deliver stuff. In this one, particularly UC Merced and CSU Fresno are doing a joint PhD program around food processing. They're doing a lot of innovation, research, commercialization work. We're part of that, but they're the lead. That blue thing at the bottom is 8 of our community colleges focusing on workforce training. Again, we're helping them, we're partnering with them more and more, but it's them in the lead. We're leading the orange one, which is the local farm and food innovation, where we're actually helping stand up small businesses, helping them get the support they need, neighborhood food hubs, aggregation hubs. We're creating a San Joaquin Valley hub for agroecology and a small farm tech alliance. And we're really excited about that because the farmers there are desperate. I don't know about your states, but in our state, you cannot get your hands on labor. I don't know how millions of people evidently just disappeared from the labor market, but you can't get your hands on anybody. I can't either as I'm hiring. So we're having to find ways to do tech, and we need to do it small scale for small farmers. We're also doing things like this, I think it's my hub, this thing's slow. Go, there we go. We're also doing things like this recent proposal, and I'm almost done. I'm not sure what the time is, but I'm probably running out of time here. Let me look. Oh yeah, I've got a couple minutes. We just submitted this because of an RFP that USDA's Ag Marketing Service did. To be honest, I wasn't planning to submit anything. I really wasn't, because it just seemed too much, and we had too many other things. Too many irons in the fire is not always a good thing. But we started getting phone calls from our partners, the ones we've been working with all over the state and even in some other states, saying, you got to coordinate this. You're the only ones that are able to coordinate this. You've proven that. So I said, well, okay, fine. We had finished turning in that NSF grant. We can take this one on. But I said, this can't be a California project. AMS is only going to do 6 or 7 of these nationally. So we went and took the federal, regional guidelines, Region 9, which is Arizona, California, Nevada, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands. We got all the groups from there. This is all the government entities that are related, the academic institutions, the private sector. And what we did is we designed something where we looked around this area at really successful projects. A great example is Los Angeles has this good food procurement program, where they're really trying to purchase local food from local farmers and get it into the school districts and other public institutions. And they've really designed an amazing program. In fact, it's getting replicated nationally and internationally. Great example that could be shared. And the other states and other places had good examples too. We've submitted this. I don't know if we're going to get it, but even if we don't, we've still got those partnerships going on. We're working, we're talking, we're making stuff happen. If we don't get this grant, we'll get another one. Or we'll get some private sector to make some of it happen. It's all good just forming these kind of relationships. Similarly, down in Orange County, one of my research extension centers, I've got 9 of them scattered around the state. This happens to be in the middle of subdivisions. This is a couple hundred acres of what used to be beautiful farmland surrounded by farmland that's now surrounded by subdivisions as far as the eye can see, right up to the borders. What my director down there has developed a vision around is the hub for urban living. How do we find the solutions for urban ag? Urban horticulture, urban forestry, water, human-wildlife interactions. That's actually turning into a huge issue in this state. In fact, I've got 2 or 3 advisors scattered around the state doing human-wildlife interactions. And I learned in one of my last visits down there that we have the Rodent Academy. Who knew? Because rats are an issue, and a lot of other things are rodents too. In fact, one of our videos that's the most watched YouTube video, the #1 most watched, in YouTube for cooperative extension here is in Spanish, and it's about dealing with bed bugs. Well, who else is going to find solutions to that? That's our job. We're the scientists. We're supposed to go find those solutions. The second most watched one is how to graft on apple trees. So, quite a mix there. But what this guy is doing is really creating this hub that's building partnerships between urban and rural. And we need that. We need urban folks to have a better understanding of where their food comes from and what goes into growing food, as well as all the other issues. And this is something, again, we're going to be replicating. In fact, Washington State hosts the Western Region Metropolitan Extension Program, and we partner with them a lot. And there's a lot of your states that have more and more urban extension. We're also doing a lot with state agencies. As I said earlier, it's crazy to me that we have entities like state agencies, county governments, etc. They're either standing up their own internal science division, which I got to tell you, I can speak from experience now, is very expensive. Scientists don't come cheap. Research isn't cheap. Facilities, laboratories, it ain't cheap. And yet they're standing it up themselves inside of an agency that really isn't about science. But they need answers. Everybody needs answers. Local government, they're either doing that or they're hiring consultants for a fortune. What we're doing here, I've now got several counties co-funding cooperative extension advisors with me on issues that are pertinent to their county. If they've got an issue that's at least a 5 or 10 year long issue, which most of our issues are, it totally makes sense to do that. It's far cheaper than the alternative, and it's a better quality product. Because my cooperative extension is associated with our state's land grant university. That means that individual in that county can reach back into the entire system and find the different specialists they need. And usually get answers from them for free because, we're all one big UC family. That's a big difference. We're doing work with all kinds of state agencies now. I mentioned that state Parks and Rec contract we just got. Now that's huge because it's my California naturalists doing the training, but they are part of our cooperative extension network. They know the people doing the work with the farmers, doing the work on irrigation and new crops. They know ag issues. And so when they're training people on environmental issues, they're giving them the best available science across the board. And that too is critical because there's a little crazy science out on the fringes. We all know that. I'm trying to get science back into data and hardcore facts and a little less emotion and, whatever some of that stuff is. So that's something we're doing. And making that happen, we just signed an MOU recently. Our State Department of Food and Ag, myself on behalf of the University of California, NRCS, I'm scared to hit this button again, but I'm going to do it. There we go. Our State Department of Food and Ag, UC, our NRCS from USDA, and our conservation districts. Because we found that we were stumbling over each other in the field. And it just wasn't productive, it wasn't useful, and frankly, all too often it got a little bit annoying. And some personalities were flaring occasionally. So we spent several months really sitting down talking about what is it we all bring to the table? What is the best thing we bring to the table? What are we supposed to be doing versus not? And how does it look? And we came up with this. This is a graphic representation of the MOU we signed. And it really lays out, our job is research. An extension. And extension's not the same as technical assistance that the conservation districts and NRCS are really world-class at. We don't need to be in that wheelhouse. And CDFA, their role is policy, funding, programs. They put a lot of money into these kind of things. What I really love about this, though, something I've been wanting for 30 years, ever since I did oversee NRCS back in the Clinton administration, is that feedback loop you see there. As we are working with landowners and the districts and NRCS, as they are working to deliver technical assistance with best management practices, best management systems from their field office tech guide, the Bible of best management practices, we are partnering with them to make sure those practices are doing what we need them to do. We're gathering data. We're working with the farmers to do monitoring. And we're putting that back up into our research priorities. So that if something's not working as well as it should or could, we can get the research going to find the better solution. And then NRCS is working closely with us to get that new, improved practice, technology, system, whatever it may be, into the field office tech guide so that when you try to access it, it's available to you with EQIP funding, cost share, whatever. You are getting the best available science and technology via this partnership and access to that financial assistance. I'm really excited. We literally just signed this MOU in November. We're still working out how it's delivering, but we had a big workshop with employees of all of our groups a couple weeks ago, and they're excited. They want to do a better job. Everybody's excited about this. I think, yes, that was my second to last slide. I'm going to end here because I could keep talking about a lot of other examples. We got lots of them. But it really comes down to trying to figure out, what does Food 3.0 look like? And this is something we kicked off several years ago with partners you see along the bottom, and we've actually got more partners now. That FME is actually the Dutch, the Netherlands, because the Dutch are a dinky, teeny little country, but they produce a heck of a lot of food. In fact, they're the world leaders in controlled environment ag, and we're doing a lot of projects with them on that. But you know, things like food for nutrition and health, supply chain integrity and functioning well, you know, how ag production can be at its best, decreasing food waste. You know, that's one of our new frontiers right now is food waste. Reducing it, and if there is food waste, getting it into something like bioenergy or some other, you know, useful product. And then just connecting farmers and consumers more than we ever have. And again, not putting that on you. I would really like to help farmers such as yourselves take a few caps off and be able to focus on being the world's best farmers. But to do that, we've really got to do what I'm calling this economic ecosystem. We've got to try to do that triple bottom line partnership and collaboration. And that's what we're doing here in California. I'm not going to claim we're doing it perfect yet. We're still working on it. It's a work in progress, but I feel pretty good about some of what we've accomplished, and I think the fact that we're seeing partners at the table, we're seeing projects implemented, we're seeing grant dollars and private investment coming in is a testament to the fact that it's a winning strategy. So I will leave it at that, and I have given my slides to these guys, so I'm assuming they may put it on their website at some point. You all can have access to it. And I don't know if this means I have 6 more minutes. Does that mean I can take a question or two? Yeah. I said I'd try to leave time for questions. So we got 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Who's got a question? Oh, there's one. Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So she's asking how to help food hubs, or some people call them aggregation hubs, survive. And it's a fantastic question because, frankly, anytime you're trying to do farmer direct to consumer or farmer to school lunch or anything like that, you have to have some sort of food hub or aggregation hub. You can't have 50 farmers backing up the truck, dumping raw crop to the school lunch ladies. That ain't gonna work. And the school lunch ladies will hate you for it. Somebody somewhere's got to take that product, do a little mixing and matching, maybe a little cutting and dicing, maybe a little packaging, a little something. It doesn't have to be hardcore processing, but it's got to be something to get that food from a farmer to where it needs to go. The problem is, and we've done this in California for 20-some years, I will say something you probably don't want to hear. I don't think you can make them work by themselves. I just don't. The economics are not there. Where we're seeing success here is where we're partnering up with public institutions. One of the most successful in the state that we're seeing replicated a lot now, our Riverside Unified School District decided to be the aggregation hub because they wanted that product into their school district. And they had the facilities and the money to actually get something going. They partnered up with some co-ops and some other organizations. And it has been so successful. They're now the food hub for not just the school district, but the local hospital, the jail, and several other public institutions. And part of it's because they were able to get those economies of scale. You know, I know economies of scale can be taken too far. We've seen CAFOs, we've seen some of our big agribusinesses, but economies of scale are a real issue. You can be too small and you're going to fail. We have to find that sweet spot in the middle. And that's why, again, I like this partnering. Academia, government, private sector. Every single thing we try to do right now, we try to have those partners at the table. And I think that's what's successful.
Jen Tuesday, Montana Farmers Union. Thank you so much for that great presentation. I'm all about food economy. And I believe, I'm very curious when you brought up access to capital, because I agree, it's just like the biggest barrier. So we have a Northwest Food Hub network, is working with the Montana Office of Public Instruction. So we have a state agency partnering with us, but there seems to be this narrow window to do that work right now. They're willing to do that investment because they got infusion of capital from USDA to be able to make it happen, to bring what we call the Montana Marinara to every single school in the state of Montana. But what's going to happen is when that USDA funding stops, who are those new investors that need to be at that table? Where's the low-hanging capital opportunities for these aggregation points, these new food hubs that are emerging nationally to address supply chain issues to local communities? We need capital. We need sustainable capital. And when do we start that dialogue to get those investors to the table to invest in us?
So I'm going to say you're coming at the problem from the wrong direction. The problem is not the investors. There are plenty of investors out there, private sector, government, et cetera. They're out there, the money's there. The problem is the delivery vehicles. That's why in the last 20 years, you've seen so many regions create community development financial institutions, CDFIs. That's one tool. There's others. We were looking at creating an entity here in California, and we're still working on it, which actually would allow us to start bringing a lot of our money home from Wall Street. I am not a fan of Wall Street at all. I think half of them belong in prison, quite frankly. But it's our bad that they've got all our money, because we don't get together and create the institutions, the financing entities to hold that money. And again, a credit union, I mean, that's a simple little thing. If your community doesn't have a credit union, why not? That old-fashioned stuff sometimes still works. What we were looking at is if we could create the right kind of entity. We were just trying to do a 1%, bring 1% of your money home from Wall Street for local investment. And again, it doesn't even have to be that. That's one example. Another is county government. Your county governments have a lot of cash that sits in Wall Street because they have to for, cash flow, right? There's a woman up here in Placer County, the elected treasurer of Placer County is a genius. And she took a lot of grief initially. She's been investing her county's dollars in projects in her county. She invested in a hydropower facility. She's invested in significant infrastructure, and she's getting just as good a return as anything in Wall Street. In fact, if you were to listen to Michael Schuman, I don't know how many of you have ever read any of his books, he'll tell you you'll get a better return potentially, if you're smart. You can't let these be halfway managed. They've got to be done smart. There's got to be integrity to them. But I think the issue is not investors. And I would urge you to go check out that book. It's online. And even though it's 10 years old, I think it's as valid now as it was 10 years ago. And it's got a lot of other different things too, like local finance groups, some of the slow money. You know, that's been a big thing here and elsewhere is slow money groups, where you've got local investors coming together in kind of a little co-op way. There's solutions out there. It's not the lack of money, it's the lack of a delivery vehicle to get it from A to B. That Access to Capital book that we did in 2012. I created and chaired this California Financial Opportunities Roundtable, Cal4. It's in the slides, you can Google it, it's online, yeah. One more.
I also work for the Department of Agricultural Economics at Mississippi State Extension. A project I have is expanding SNAP in our farmers markets, and I've had a lot of pushback from different market managers and the counties in my state. And I wanted to ask you how you were so productive in getting Extension to work with the government in California, because I'm having the worst trouble trying to get them to work with me, and I work for Extension.
Well, that's a good question. I have an unfair advantage over you. I'm the boss. I told them they will do it. And I also make any mini grants or any flexible money I have contingent upon them doing it. Your cooperative extension boss could be doing the same thing, but to be fair to them, because I don't want to throw them under the bus, your university leadership has got to be on board on extension doing this. Your state legislature needs to be supportive. And too often, they don't even know who extension is. That's part of the problem. Cooperative extension is typically one of the best kept little secrets out there. And that, again, that's part of the reason a lot of folks ask me to take this job, because I think best kept secret is a stupid thing. What is the advantage of that? And I make a point of getting us in front of people and making sure people know what we can do, even if I have to initially give them some freebies for a while. I hate to say it, but it's the heroin strategy. You get people hooked on stuff, and then they want more and more and more of it. Right now, I've got people all over this state screaming for more cooperative extension to do more things. And that's because we showed them what it could do for them. I don't know that that's a great answer, but you could have your boss call me. I'll talk to him.
Thank you again to Dr. Humiston for providing so many insights about how we as a farmers union organization and as farmers union members can leverage those resources available to us and to learn more about California food and agriculture. So thank you again. So before our next speaker comes to the stage, I just wanted to share a few announcements that will cover some of the rest of the day's activities. So after our session wraps today at about 10 this morning, if you're involved in the insurance meeting, that starts at 10:30 in the garden room. That's 2 floors back up on the atrium level. Then there will also be 6 breakout sessions today. There's 3 in the first section and 3 in the second section. You can learn more about those in the convention program, the long skinny one. Those will all be on the second level, so just one flight up from here. And you'll be able to find out where those are, just one escalator ride up from here. But the first 3 breakouts start at 10:15, and they are, the first one, Explorations in Leadership, Insights from a Co-op Startup Perspective. Another one is on Solar Energy Siting on Agricultural Lands, Finding a Balanced Approach, and Farmers Union's Farm Bill History. Then we'll have a second session of breakouts starting at 1 p.m., so you've got a little time for lunch on your own in there. The second group includes Organizing the Next Generation of Ag Advocates, One Engine at a Time, New Innovations for Biofuels in Carbon Reduction, and someday all this will be theirs. How will the next generation regard us? So after those breakout sessions, we will convene back in the main session hall here at 2:30. And at 2:30, we'll start some of the business of considering and adopting NFU policy. So delegates, be sure to wear your red name badge. I see many of them out there already. And you have to have those to have the right credentials for the policy consideration process. We'll have a few announcements and speakers at the 2:30 session, and I expect around 3:15 those policy considerations will begin in this room. Also, as you came in this morning, you probably saw on the tables by the back doors there, you probably saw the policy addendum. This includes some of the changes to the big delegate book that you've already received. The changes in this document are from the work of the policy committee over the last couple of days, and thanks to your policy input there as well. There's also 3 draft special orders of business that this policy committee would like for the delegate body to consider. So be sure to pick up the 3 special order drafts and the policy addendum from those tables in the back. They'll be available after this session, and then as well once we come back in this room at 2:30. But now, I will, in just a moment here, turn over the stage to National Farmers Union President Rob LaRue and our next guest speaker. I will hold for just a moment here as they wrap up a meeting that is closing up right now, and so just hang tight for just a minute. This would be a time where we would sing in the past. There's been some long conversations about whether we should or shouldn't sing. I hear Nick is yelling that we should sing. I'm thinking we're going to save the singing for tomorrow. And I also realize this is I am the person on stage right now, and that would suggest that I would be the one to sing. So with that, please welcome National Farmers Union President Rob LaRue.
All right, how we doing? All righty. Well, really excited about our next guest and speaker. The following words were used recently at the National Fly-In at USDA by our next speaker. In his remarks, he noted that in many respects, National Farmers Union has been the architect and designer in terms of the work we're doing in this administration in rural America and farm country. The Biden-Harris administration takes the issues of antitrust and competition more seriously than any administration in recent memory, unless folks are remembering like the days of Teddy Roosevelt. NFU is in a great position to have a huge impact. To give some updates on what USDA is up to and how our united voice is impacting change, it is really my honor to welcome to the stage a member of Iowa Farmers Union, the former governor of Iowa, and the past and current United States Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
Morning, morning. Thanks, Rob. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, folks. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. It's always better if the standing ovation is after you speak than before. All right, now, please excuse this. I'm not the greatest drawer in the world, but it is important for you to know kind of what I'm thinking. And I have to draw it to be able to explain it to you. And it just takes me a second to do this. Okay, we're going to start here. The last couple of years, we had record farm income. I'm going to put that up here. Record farm income. This year it's expected not to be a record, but to be well above the historic average. Normally, when a Secretary of Agriculture starts a speech with that comment, he or she can leave the stage. But there's a problem. And the problem starts over here. I'm going to draw a box around 5 of my friends here. And they represent nearly 50% of American farmers, ranchers, who in record years had negative income, negative farm income. Then I'm going to draw a little box around these fellows. And they represent 40% or so of American farmers who made a little money during those record years, but made the majority of the money they made to take care of their families from off-farm income. So if you're sticking with me here, %10 made a lot of money. And of that 10%, that represents an investment bank. 3 to 4% of that 10% aren't even farmers. They're people who work with farmers, who provide resources, who own land. So why is it we got this system? Well, you all know this. The current system has farmers making money essentially in 3 ways. They sell crops, they raise crops and sell them. They raise livestock and sell them. And they get government payments. Now these, by the way, these folks are the folks who sell more than $1 million a year. That's who that 10% is. In the 1970s, we changed our system from what we had in place during the New Deal to a system that said to all of you, produce. Produce, produce, produce. Remember? Some of you can remember fence row to fence row, the whole nine yards. Fence row to fence row. And you know what? Farmers did that. They responded amazingly. In fact, I read a statistic the other day that farmers are 17 times more productive than they used to be when I was a kid. 17 times more productive. Amazing. The problem is that as you became more productive, the costs of that increased. You needed bigger machinery. You needed more sophisticated seed. And the result was that over time, you needed more land to be able to spread the costs of all of that over a larger base. And these folks got bigger. And these folks basically stayed small and mid-sized. Or dropped out. You remember both my predecessor and successor. I can say that. Sonny Perdue came after me and I came after him. He was quite honest with farmers in Wisconsin. Somebody asked him about this. And he said, look, the system in America is pretty simple. And he was very honest. I give him credit for it. He said, you got to get big or get out. I don't accept that. And I don't think you do either. But that does raise the question of what do we do if this is the game that's based on production? I think we got to develop a new game, a different game. A game where farmers can not only raise crops and sell them and raise livestock and sell them and get government payments, but that they can get other ways to make money from the same landmass, from the same farming operation. In other words, create additional opportunities that have not existed or expand ones that do. So I think one area that gives us the opportunity to do that is climate. People are constantly talking about climate as the problem. And I think it's an opportunity for American agriculture. Clearly, we want climate-smart agriculture. And we have parts of that with our organic system. And this administration's put $300 million behind an effort to expand organic. But we've also put resources behind climate-smart agriculture, 141 projects. National Farmers Union is involved in several of them. And these projects are designed to basically create a new commodity. A commodity that's created through climate-smart practices that the marketplace values at a higher value. That's a new revenue stream. In addition, as you're doing climate-smart agriculture, you can qualify for ecosystem service markets. There are, I'm told, 24 of those markets in existence today. They're carbon markets, they're water markets, they're crop diversity markets, wildlife markets, there are a variety of markets. And we've put roughly $3 billion behind this effort to enable even small and mid-sized operations to take advantage. It's about creating competition. You all have been very insistent on that, and rightfully so. So we've committed to processing. And I will tell you, today we're announcing an additional 11 projects in 7 states across America. Roughly $89 million is going to go into our intermediary relending program. This is a lending program that provides credit to independently owned and operated processing capacities to expand, to get equipment, whatever their needs are. This is in addition to the money that we've put into expanding market opportunities for 278 processing facilities that now will begin to sell across state lines, in addition to the 30 processing projects that we've provided $150 million to be able to expand capacity in a variety of states, in addition to the loan guarantee program, where we have put hundreds of millions of dollars behind an effort to expand the supply chain capacity of processing. And we're going to do more. We're going to make more announcements to continue to expand processing capacity and continue to support the supply chain. These are resources that didn't exist before, that create competition, that create better value. We're also today announcing a new rule, a proposed rule involving product of the USA. There are folks today, voluntary folks today, who put that label on packages. So we went out and we surveyed people in the country and we said, what do you think that means when you see that? They said, well, it means, you know, whatever was done with that product was done in America. Well, it turns out that's not the case. This label is currently assessed on products if they're processed in the U.S., which means they could be born someplace, they could be slaughtered someplace, they could be raised someplace else, but not in the U.S., and still get this label. The proposed rule that we're putting out today would say, if you want to use this label, or you want to made in the USA label for beef, poultry, processed eggs, pork, you can only do it if the critter was raised here, born here, raised here, slaughtered here, and processed here. In fact, everything's done in Europe. Standing up in the middle of the speech is better than at the beginning, but not as good at the end. Okay. While I'm talking about this, we're also putting out today a seed report. The president in 2021, July of 21, issued an executive order on competition, and he instructed USDA to basically take a look at the intellectual property process for seed technology, and to make sure that it was fair and reasonable. And we're putting out this seed report where we got information from folks. We listened to farmers, we listened to breeders, we listened to researchers, we listened to seed companies, and we put this report together. And from this report, we're making 3 specific steps today. First, we're going to create within USDA and the AMS division a liaison, a seed liaison. And this individual's responsibility will be to, as folks seek patent protection, to be able to make sure that farmers or breeders who have ideas and thoughts about this, about whether or not that's actually should be appropriate, they will now have a place and a person that they can go to share information and to make sure that that information is supplied in the formal, complex process that is involved in patents. We all know how complex that is, and because it's so complex, only folks over here understand the system, or pay people who understand the system. This now gives these folks an opportunity to have input. We're also going to create a working task force between the Patent Training Office and the Patent and Trademark Office and USDA. And the purpose of that working group is to make sure that they work closely with DOJ, the FTC, to make sure that things are on the level. As you know, from time to time, seed companies will stack traits. They'll take the basic research and they'll stack traits. They'll get patent protection for that, and then they'll sell it to you. And oftentimes, some of those traits are very important and you want them. But sometimes they include traits that you don't absolutely need because of the place that you are in the country. It's kind of like your cable bill, you know. You got all those channels that you're never in a lifetime going to be able to watch. You don't even know what they are, and you're paying for them. Same kind of thing here. We want to make sure that as these things are stacked, that we really look at this from a regional and local perspective to see whether or not we can target and more appropriately focus and funnel the intellectual property protection that ultimately results in limited choice. If we make sure that everyone's involved, choices expand, options are created, competition is created, and hopefully prices come down. So in addition to processing, we're also committed to local and regional food systems. And local and regional food systems basically, it's the farm to school, farm to grocery store, farm to institutional purchaser. And we're now using the procurement dollars of USDA as we purchase food for food banks or purchase food for school meals. We're beginning to require that a portion of those resources be spent with small and mid-sized producers and not the big guy. Don't underestimate the importance of this. We took $10 million and provided farm-to-school grants. We funded 5,000 schools with those grants. That's 5,000 new market opportunities for folks, for farmers in local communities across the United States. There are 100,000 school districts. There's a lot of opportunity here. And we're going to create, later this year, regional business centers to support this effort, in addition to the procurement efforts. And these regional business centers will be places where people can go and get the technical assistance and the financial assistance to be able to build out their local and regional food system. We're making a commitment to renewable energy. And this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. I'll give you one example. Sustainable aviation fuel. As I say to many audiences, I get electric cars, I get it. Get an electric car and battery wears out, you pull aside a road, a cell phone call, you get a charge, off you go. But what if you're in a plane? And you're over a body of water? How does that work? We need sustainable aviation fuel. This is an industry that does not exist today for all intents and purposes. It's 36 billion gallons of 100% drop in fuel. Our aviation industry is begging for this. And it can come from agricultural waste, from a variety of what you grow and raise that has little value today that can be applied to creating a whole new industry and jobs associated with it. And while we're at it, there's the bio-based opportunity as well. Just to give you a sense of this, the infrastructure law contained $10 million to invest in a couple of bio-based products. We're trying to develop natural rubber from agricultural products here in the U.S. We don't grow rubber here. We don't raise rubber trees and so forth. It puts us at a disadvantage from a national security perspective. So what would be nice would be our ability to create natural rubber from what you all grow and raise. We're also using soybeans to produce new ways to repair our roads and asphalt. So there are literally today, USDA has 139 categories of bio-based products under our bio-based preferred program, where we try to encourage federal agencies to purchase bio-based products. 139 categories. Within those categories, there are literally lists and lists and lists of products. So this is an enormous opportunity to create not just 1, 2, 3, but 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ways for that same farm operated by these folks to create profit centers. And the good news is we've got American Rescue Plan resources, we have infrastructure resources, we've got IRA resources, conservation resources that can really help this piece of it, and the Commodity Credit Corporation. So as we begin this process of discussing a farm bill, it's really pretty simple. We have to ask ourselves, do we want a system that helps a few good people, don't begrudge them their profit, or do we want a system that helps many and most? That to me is the fundamental question. This is where we are, and I hope that's where you are. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. Are you here from?
You need to
Over here. Okay, got it.
Well, you've given us a lot to take in, and a lot to really capture so much of the work that you guys have been working on for a long time. And we know that you remain committed to pushing this even further along. Wondered, on kind of building out some of the issues and themes around competition and so forth, if you might share some of the update around the Packers and Stockyards Act and bringing more fairness to that space.
So the regulatory process is a cumbersome one, all right? You need to understand that in order to get a rule through, the first thing you need to do is you need to develop the rule, but you got to get it through the Office of Management and Budget, you got to get it through the General Counsel's Office at the White House, and oftentimes the Department of Justice has a few things to say about it. So you get through an interagency process. That takes a while. And we got that interagency process completed with our transparency rule that basically is suggesting, especially for poultry, that as people are doing business with these large-scale integrators, that they have a basic understanding of who they're doing business with and whether or not they're a going concern and things of that nature. That process, that rule is in its final stages of approval. We anticipate and expect, we've gotten comments, the comment period's over. We're in the process of analyzing those comments, and we anticipate and expect that rule to be finalized in calendar year 2023. While that process was ongoing, we started the second rule, which was really focused on the notion that if you have been discriminated against as an individual, or you have been retaliated against because you may have reported an entity to a regulatory agency, and as a result of that, you got retaliated against, we established a rule that essentially said you can't do that, you can't retaliate, you can't discriminate. That rule is, the comment period I think is just about over, if it's not already over. We'll analyze those comments, and our anticipated timeline is to get that rule completed and in the books, if you will, by the end of 2023. During the course of our efforts on packers and stockyards, we heard a lot of complaints and concerns about the poultry system on the poultry side, and we're going to put together a rule that begins to address some of the concerns about that system. And that rule is in the process of being worked on. That's a kind of a new concept. When we first started this, we weren't actually thinking about, but by virtue of comments that we got, we thought we needed to do that. Our expected anticipation is that we would file that rule for public and for comment sometime in 2023, and that work would obviously bleed over ultimately in 2024. And by the end of this year, we will be in a position, I believe, to do the fourth rule, which is sort of scope of the scope rule, which is the most complicated rule that has to do with whether or not there's the need to establish that the entire industry has been impacted and affected by a certain process and a certain practice from a competition standpoint, or whether the individual farmer has been hurt in order to be able to bring a packers and stockyards case. So that rule obviously is going to attract a lot of attention. We expect and anticipate to get that out end of the year and hopefully completed in 2024. So the goal here is to get all four of them done by 2024. Two for sure finalized in 2023, and two out there for comment and consideration in 2023.
All right. So kind of looking back over some of the questions that our members have posed here, one of them is related to the food system transformation effort. And, as you so eloquently laid out there on the whiteboard, you have a lot of work going on in this space. You have the support going out there for local and regional processing, and then underpinning that, some of the lending support and so forth. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of the vision and the effort that you have in that space?
Yeah, you bet. And I appreciate you saying that my artwork was elegant.
It gives me hope that my handwriting is not very strong.
The best report card I ever got was in 5th grade, and we had 12 subjects back in those days. I got 11 A's, and I got 1 B. You can guess which is where the B was. So here's the theory behind food system transformation, which is essentially creating a market opportunity, multiple market opportunities that are local and regional, that make our system more resilient. We learned during the pandemic that this efficient system that benefits large-scale folks was highly efficient, but not resilient. And certainly not resilient when you consider that in a record year, a handful of folks benefit and most folks are still struggling. So our theory is, let's create a different structure where small and mid-sized producers have the ability not to accept a commodity price that's dictated by global activity and circumstances where somebody decides to invade a country and everything gets turned upside down, but somewhere where you have more control, or where you can take advantage of a value-added proposition like organic or climate smart. So that's basically what we're doing. And what we've done is it's a combination of grants and loan guarantees that we've put together in various programs. And the key here, the beauty of this is, at least from a climate smart perspective, the Inflation Reduction Act contains an historic amount of resource for NRCS. Now, you aren't going to see a significant increase in 2023 in terms of NRCS capacity. It went up about 12% from the IRA. But next year, it doubles. And the year after that, it doubles again. So just think about that for just a second. That means there's going to be a whole lot of conservation, a whole lot of opportunity to embrace climate-smart agriculture practices. And as that's happening, we're building the market opportunity, because there is definitely a desire on the part of consumers. They want to know where their food comes from. They want to know whether it's local. They want to know if it's been sustainably produced. And American agriculture and these small and mid-sized producers are in a good position to be able to respond specifically to that. And as they do it with product of the U.S., in some cases, they can also ensure people that, you know what, you're buying something that everything was done right here. So IRA is a critically important component. Farm Bill, critically important component in terms of recognizing the need for this kind of system and basically authorizing and approving continued support for local and regional food systems, continued support for climate smart practices, continued support for organic, continued support for processing, and for the supply chain that supports processing. And I believe that at the end of the day, if we make a concerted effort to make this happen, the following happens. One, farm income for these small and mid-sized folks improves. Two, there are more rural jobs that are created. Three, American agriculture gets to a net zero future faster than anybody else does, and so we have an opportunity to obtain an advantage in an international market. And four, because something really entrepreneurial and sustainable and exciting is happening in rural places, a lot of those young people who felt that they didn't have options now have many options. They can run that processing facility, they can run that food hub, they can run that farm to school program, they can run an organic operation, or they can help market a farm family that's now going online and selling across the United States. And with the Reconnect program and the broadband stuff that's going to expand access to meaningful high-speed internet from the infrastructure law, now you have the ability literally to market anywhere in the world. That's the future. To me, that's the alternative to get big or get out. We got to have an alternative to that. Otherwise, it's a very, it's a pretty depressing picture. And you folks have been hammering this forever, right? Hammering forever. I mean, I can remember as a governor candidate, we had these conversations, and for whatever reason, and I think, frankly, the president deserves some credit here because, he saw the need for the American Rescue Plan, which is helping to jumpstart this. He saw the need for investing in infrastructure, which we've talked about forever. He saw the need for additional opportunities to rebuild and transform the American economy. And I think American agriculture has a place in that transformation, and I think we're going to get there faster than a lot of other industries.
Appreciate it. So National Farmers Union is proud to serve as one of the 4 co-chairs of the Food and Ag Climate Alliance. And really kind of working to deliver kind of through that collaboration, suggestions and ideas. You guys at USDA have been a great partner in that. But obviously one of the challenges as we look at climate smart ag and so forth is still that gap between what farmers see as the real potential, what makes sense for them and their operations, depending on the complexity of what part of the country they're in. And could you spend a little time talking about kind of the vision and the effort between behind the projects that are going on right now that hopefully will help fill some of that gap?
Yeah. So we divided this into 2 tranches. We had large-scale projects that were fairly significant in terms of dollars. We got about 71 of those, and then we had a small grant program designed for smaller producers to be able to participate, underserved producers to be able to participate. We got 71 or 72 projects in that tranche, so all told 141 projects. So the way this works, the first thing that has to happen is detailed contracts have to be signed by the government with each of the projects and the leading entity for each project. And the reason you have to have that is you have to have budgets, you have to have an understanding of when resources are going to be needed, you have to have an understanding of where that project wants to go and how we determine whether it works or doesn't work, and what partners they have and how they integrate those partners. That's not as easy as it sounds. It's a bit complicated. Our hope is that we will get those contracts completed. We'll start seeing a number of them signed in the next couple of months, and then they will begin the process of working with their farmers by providing farmers the resources. And in exchange for the resources, the farmers will be expected to do A, B, and C. That's totally voluntary. Farmers don't have to participate, but if they do, they get resources to be able to do certain things. And then we've enlisted the help of nearly 100 universities, minority-serving institutions, other organizations to be able to help us keep track of the cumulative impact and effect of each of these practices. And while that's taking place, the lead agency will be working with additional partners to say, okay, now that we've created this commodity, whatever it is, through climate smart practices, where's the market for it? And many of these projects have already identified their market partner. So their partner will say, okay, for that particular product, we will pay X more than we would normally pay. That then creates the circle, if you will, to allow the government to get out of the business of providing the resources and having the marketplace provide the resource. So essentially, you get a higher price for what you're producing, and the farmer gets a better share of it because they can prove and establish results. At the same time, as those results are quantified and measured, it opens up the opportunity for that farmer to go to a market and say, I can prove that I'm reducing greenhouse gases by X, I can prove that I'm sequestering this amount of carbon, or combinations of those farmers can prove cumulative impact, and that market can say, well, in exchange for that result, we will pay you X. So you get a second payment. Part of these projects also involve the conversion of agricultural waste into a variety of new products. That's a third option for profit that comes out of this, and that's the bio-based, renewable energy aspect of it. And by the way, the renewable energy aspect, if folks are looking at producing a methane, capturing methane from livestock and converting it, or they're looking at some kind of solar or wind or whatever it might be, there's an historic amount of REAP resources in the Inflation Reduction Act that provides a grant. And instead of, we've increased the percentage of the grant so that the farmer's out not as much cash as they used to be for those projects. So this is an enormous opportunity to embrace multiple profit centers and have government assistance in getting you comfortable, not putting you at risk initially as you learn about this. And then the omnibus bill contained a provision that requires us to put together the nature-based climate solutions process, which is designed to help ultimately certify these markets so that they are farmer-friendly.
Great, thanks. Another question here, actually from one of our members in Colorado, kind of speaks generally to the question around risk management and the importance of crop insurance, but how sometimes we have competing signals where we're encouraged either economically or through the marketplace to diversify the crops that we're growing. It might be better for soil health and so forth, but that problems and gaps in coverage for certain crops under crop insurance really hinder and limit that ability to diversify and be able to respond to the needs of the land or to the markets. And so are there efforts underway right now? Certainly it'll be a focus in the Farm Bill, but are there efforts underway to make sure that the risk management tools that are out there, crop insurance in particular, can better serve diversified operations?
No, I think so, in a couple of different ways. First of all, there's the cover crop initiative where we are essentially providing a bit of a premium or a reduction in premium for those folks who are embracing cover crops. My hope and belief is that ought to be a more permanent aspect of, and not to be just a kind of a pilot thing. So there's that. RMA is constantly looking for ways to improve the product. We have, I think, over 600 different policies now at our RMA, and that's, I know the last time I was secretary, we didn't have anywhere near that many policies, and I think the more diversification that takes place, the greater the database is for being able to make the calculation of what the risk is and how you create an appropriate mechanism to protect that risk. So I think there are a number of things within RMA. And then, we're also looking at the way in which we are dealing with disasters and emergency relief. We have a lot of producers out there that just, for whatever reason, they don't really know all they need to know about the various programs that exist. For that reason, we've done two things. One, we spent resources from the American Rescue Plan and basically went out and provided these resources to groups that represent underserved producers. They could be beginning farmers, they could be veteran farmers, they could be minority farmers, a combination of those folks. And we basically said, make sure with this resource that you do outreach, make sure that folks know about various programs that we have at USDA, whether it's loan programs or crop insurance, whatever it might be. NRCS also has a companion program where they've provided resources to over 100 organizations. The FSA's got contracts with about 80 or so. So the word's getting out about these programs. And one of the things that we learned from the outreach was the NAP program, people didn't know that they had to, take certain steps to get that coverage. And so we said, well, if they're already on file, if they've already identified themselves as an underserved producer with the filings at FSA, maybe we should retroactively figure out a way to help them. And then instead of, this is really important, this is an important point. This system that we have for providing government assistance is based on what? What's it based on? It's production in acres, right? Yeah. Well, who does that help? He's a smart man over here.
Yeah, he is.
You come up here and do this. Right. But the problem is the system is based on size. We started with the phase 2 of the emergency relief package to look at ways in which we could base it on revenue or revenue lost. Now, that's not necessarily based on number of acres. It's based on the impact on your operation to that particular. So I think that also complements the effort to try to expand ways in which we can provide more incentives for diversification, but also understand that when you diversify, your whole operation may be impacted by something that impacts some but not all of those crops. And maybe this is also a way of beginning to address the disparity.
Well, actually, Professor Vilsack, if you could allow me just a minute. One of the things that you were pointing out earlier was, efforts to, instead of allowing the big guys to pay for assistance to be able to tap into additional resources, and I think that was around maybe the patent question. But as we look at outreach for all of the new efforts and initiatives that you guys have underway through food system transformation and so forth, and rural development in particular is just doing amazing work. But a lot of farmers and growers don't have any direct experience in tapping into those or necessarily the technical skills to rely or to be able to pull those things together. So share a little bit more about this. Dr. Humiston was joining us before here and spoke a little bit to this, but if you could talk about how we can better connect.
Well, you got to have a place to go, right? Where do you go? So just so you know how complicated this is, there are 50 different programs within USDA that arguably support a local and regional food system. Now, I've been secretary for 10 years. I don't know them all. How in the heck can we expect any farmer to know them, right? So you need a place, a number of places, that you can go, literally, physically go, or communicate with, where there are people staffed that do know what those programs are, do know who the person is that you have to contact, do know what the application requires, do know what the qualifications are for a successful application. So that's what these rural business centers will do. There'll be a place where you go and say, I'm really interested in doing X, Y, or Z. I'm interested in a local regional food system. I may be interested in processing. What about this bio-based stuff? What can I do there? Well, here's the program, here's the person, here's what you need to be able to establish. Let us help you, walk you through that process. And I think that's the goal here, and we have resources to get these things funded for 5 years, so we can make the case in future farm bills that this ought to be a permanent structure of all of this.
All right, thank you. One of the other questions here has to do with the interest that a number of our state divisions and certainly at National Farmers Union, we work in some communities with our urban farmers and those networks. And is there anything you can share about USDA's efforts to make sure that there is connection and outreach? You've talked a little bit about that, but specifically in those urban growing centers.
Well, I think the first thing is to make sure that they understand that they aren't city cousins to their country cousins, that they actually have the same kind of opportunity that somebody in the countryside has, which means a Farm Service Agency office being located in those initial 17 centers that have been established, so that they have an office, they have a place where they can go, they have a relationship that they can build with the individuals in that office in terms of how do I get a loan, how do I get a microloan. One of the things we're looking at, back to your question about RMA, is a micro farm attitude, you know, a system and a series of steps that can be supportive of micro farms. So whether it's the microloan program and seeking an increase in the loan level for that program, or whether it's a microloan farm policy that you can buy for risk management purposes, or is it, how do you know where your office is? Well, maybe you work with a cooperator that we're hiring to get word out to you. Well, then you establish that relationship with the local FSA office that's located in your city. And that supports urban agriculture. Now, why would that be important to folks in rural places? Well, it's really pretty simple. You want people to respect what you do. You want people to understand how difficult farming is. And you want support from members of Congress, Senate, who represent predominantly urban-centered districts or states. So, you know, you want those folks to understand. So if they have people in their district, in their city where they live, and there are constant examples of new farming operations starting, community gardens helping to furnish the local food bank, working with the local school, a series of community gardens. After this event, I'm headed to a school here in San Francisco with the first partner, Gavin Newsom's wife, and a number of other dignitaries, where we're going to talk about California's commitment to nutrition, California's commitment to purchasing local foods for schools, and the good work that they're doing in terms of making sure that every kid has access to a good, decent meal. You know, as that stuff happens, people then begin to get that connection between agriculture and their children, and then they understand that a farm bill isn't just a farm bill. It's a whole lot more than that. And then all of a sudden they say, I'm interested in that farm bill. I'm interested in what goes on there.
We're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. I apologize for that. One of the things that, you know, as I look at the work that you're doing, particularly this go around in this administration and the priority that this administration has on not just competition, but climate, and a lot of the priorities that certainly a lot of our members share and that we advocate for, I might just ask you to give us a little glimpse inside the president's cabinet, your relationship with the rest of government, because too often we get the feeling that there's a real disconnect between agencies over the years, and that, you know, we see a change in a different approach in this administration, but it might be useful for folks to hear from your perspective what that work is like.
Well, I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with the president on the campaign trail. And during the course of, I think we did at least 50 events together. I tried to explain to him the contribution that rural America makes to the rest of the country, and the importance of understanding that people in my party need to be in a position to speak more clearly, more forcefully, and more directly to those folks. And he listened, and I'll tell you why I know he listened. He did one of the first things he did as president was to sign an equity executive order. Now, I'm sure that if I basically ask all the folks in this audience for you to define what would have been included in that executive order, you would no doubt have said, well, that's about race, or it's about gender, or it's about this or that. I doubt that any of you would have said, well, that's about rural. But the president put rural in that executive order because he saw it as an equity issue. He saw it as hey, are resources disproportionately are they being shared equitably? Are opportunities being created equitably? Now, you know, presidents they have to talk about a lot of things, and when they talk about things, they can't talk about everything. And that's why they got a cabinet. They hire people, and they ask people to go out and say, be the spokesperson for the administration in this area. And I happen to be, as Ag Secretary, it's part of my responsibility to be the rural spokesperson. So, so the executive order was one indication. Then in cabinet meetings, the president always asks about what are we doing in rural areas. I mean, and that's not always, doesn't always happen, okay? So he's a guy that's genuinely concerned about this. And he basically directed me to figure this out. You know, I went on the campaign, when he called me to ask me to take this job, he said, I've got some bad news for you. And I thought, well, okay, you know, I've already been in a cabinet. I don't need to, you know, have another job. He says, I want you to go back to ag. And he said, the reason I do is because you talked about this vision. Well, you've convinced me that it's the right vision. Now you got to go make it happen. That was the bad news. But the resources that we have has allowed us to jumpstart this and to begin to have people understand the possibility. And what I want this audience and every audience I've been speaking to understand is it's not just isolated organic over here and local and regional food over here and processing over here. It's part of a concerted effort to create another model. One that doesn't necessarily require us to not produce. We want to produce. The world needs us to produce. But one that creates more revenue opportunities within that same small and mid-sized farming operation so that those who choose to remain small or mid-sized, or for whatever reason that's where they are, that they're not faced with the dilemma and the pressure of having to say to the next generation, we just can't continue. So one thing I know about everyone in this room who's a farmer is at the end of the day, that's really what they want, is the ability to say to that next generation, which is true of everybody in America. You always want the next generation to have it better than you had. And I think American farmers will like the ability to be able to say to the next generation, if son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, if you want to farm, there's opportunity here. And so that's what this is. And it's a system. It's not just an isolated set of programs. It's a holistic approach to try to create as many new profit centers as possible, and then try to create mechanisms through cooperators, through rural business, through the business centers, through mechanisms to make it easy for people to interact with that system, to be able to figure out, well, I can take advantage of that ecosystem market, or I can take advantage of that climate smart agriculture commodity, or I can take advantage of that farm to school program. People have to be able to see how they personally can take advantage of it, and that's the goal.
Well, I think it's fair to say it's a goal that certainly we support, and through those comments, I feel like we've heard our charge to help this vision come to fruition. Certainly appreciate the generosity of your time, your skills on the whiteboard there, and really the vision that you're trying to execute here. Thank you so much. Join me in thanking him.
So thank you.
All right, everybody. We have lots of things that folks can chat about during this brief break here. You'll have about 15 minutes. We have the breakout sessions. You've had those announcements and so forth. Enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for your breakout rooms, they're listed on the screens. We are trying to turn the room for this afternoon, so if you could continue your conversations in the hallway, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you and have a great day. If you could continue your conversations in the hallway, that'd be great. If you're here any longer, the hotel might put you to work, stacking chairs and putting tables out.
Más atrás.